everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm going to walk through the get started with the smart contracts page. Hopefully everyone can see it. So, so there are two components to the story protocol smart contracts. There's the core part, which contains all the core protocol logic, such as the IP asset registry, the license registry, the module registry, which are in charge of registering items. And then there's also modules such as licensing module, royalty module, and dispute module, which are, as the name implies, doing licensing, royalties, and dispute related logic. And then there's some more components like access controller, which is in charge of controlling the access for IP accounts, and then there's the IP account contract, which is the actual implementation of the ERC 6551, but for IP related purposes. Yeah, so that's the core repo, and you can check out the code here in the contracts. I recommend checking out the V0 or V1.00 because that's where the SDK and API is currently pinned at. Um, yeah, and then there's the story protocol periphery, which sort of provides a thin wrapper around the core contracts, so that it's easier for users to interact with story protocol, especially for front end and SDKs. So right now, the core item in the story protocol periphery is the story protocol gateway, or SPG for short. And this basically is it's sort of combining multiple functions into one function, so that whenever you call it on from a front end or a SDK, you can just wait for one transaction instead of waiting for multiple transactions sequentially, and it also allows you to create NFT collections that you can then use to mint freely as the owner of the NFT collection. So it sort of allows you to do everything that most use cases of story protocol in a very simple way. And you could also write this yourself on a as a separate app if you want, as a smart contract app. But story protocol gateway is just one way to one in display of how to interact with the story protocol core contracts. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through this each step. Anytime, let me know if you have any questions. And the source of truth for this uh, walkthrough will be the story protocol um, boilerplate. And this is basically a simple, repo of all these different contracts that are examples of how to interact with both the story protocol gateway in the periphery and the story protocol core contracts, such as the IP asset registry. And this was updated a couple hours ago, so I recommend going over them later too. But these are pretty simple. We are going to add more complex, app, a smart contract app to just an example. But yeah, right now these are, I think, decent examples to refer to. So first, whenever you want to do smart contract engineering on story protocol, we recommend just cloning the boilerplate, and then so you clone the boilerplate, you go into the contract, or you go into the repo, and then just call yarn, which installs all the packages that it needs to build the contracts and then test the contracts. And so once you test the contracts using this command below here, which is for test dash dash fork URL, and then some public Sefolia RPC URL, or some URL from Alchemy or QuickNode. Once you run the test on the contracts, you can then deploy it separately. So everything here in this repo currently should be all passing test. Um, but I also recommend you to go through them yourselves as well. It's very simple, just 3 steps and then the test. And if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. Yeah, so this is basically setting up the development environment by cloning the story protocol boilerplate. I'm going to go through each step more specifically, so that you have better understanding of each step. So, in Story Protocol, every time you want to register an asset, or IP account, you have to have a ERC21 NFT. So that means Bored Ape or CryptoPunk that you have, or you might some other people have, is already eligible for registration into our protocol. Um, there's no like additional wrapping involved. You can just sort of register ERC 721 NFTs into the protocol right away. And that's possible because the IP account that we wrote. So if you look at the core protocol, if you look at the core protocol, there's a contract called IP account implementation, which uses ERC 6551 standard to um, for this process. But basically, what this does is, um, when you want to create an IP account, you call the ERC 6551 registry. Um, so normally, when you want to create some token bound account for your NFT, which means that it's a smart contract that is associated with your NFT, so that your NFT can hold assets to that account. And the owner of the token bound account points to the NFT owner. So it's like a direct like pointer. So basically, the IP account implementation, whenever you go through the IPS registry to register IP accounts, so there's a function called register, which registers the NFT contract and your token ID as a IP account, and then it does all this like setting metadata and the emitting of the event. And this basically means that you're registering your NFT and token ID into Story Protocol as well as through Story Protocol to the ERC 6551 registry. And what this means, what this means is you're basically this IPS registry is sort of a wrapper function around ERC 6551, and you can actually call this register function on any contracts, any NFT contracts, and any token ID. This is we set it up to be a permissionless registration so that anyone can register for any other people's NFTs. And because it is permissionless, we didn't want to give this function any too much power. So what this basically does is just registers it and then sets the name to the NFT contract's name and some other metadata. So like, there's nothing crazy going on here. It's just registration. Um, so I could register for all the other Bored Ape people if I want to, for example. So we're going to go through. This is like, if you want to set up the Foundry from the start, I recommend going through these steps. So yarn init in a folder, yarn init, and then forge init to initialize the forge Foundry folder, and then you should remove the lib folder and the git modules because it sort of collides with our mapping system. And then you should remove the default counter file and then test file. And then you should add these packages as dependencies, and then these packages as dev dependencies using yarn in that folder. And once you do that, you should add this text of file to remappings, which basically means whenever you compile the contracts, you are you are letting the compiler know that these namings are actually referring to the specific folders. So this is if you want to go through setting up your own repo, but if you clone the boilerplate, all of this should be already completed and you just run yarn. So the first step is creating a simple registration contract. We call it the IPA registrar. So what this does is, um, there is a function called mint IP. So what mint IP does is, the first, it mints the NFT. So we require that this contract holds an ownership to an NFT. So in this case, I create a simple NFT collection. So it's simple NFT in the context is the ERC 721 wrapper. So it creates a simple NFT collection, and then and whenever someone calls mint IP, it just mints the NFT from that collection, and this contract can do that because it owns it, and then it registers that NFT token ID and the contract address to the IP asset registry. So basically what's happening is you mint an NFT, which is an IP, and then you register it as an IP account through the Story protocol. There's also another way to do it. There's the going through the Story Protocol gateway. And the nice thing about Story Protocol gateway is it also allows you to like set metadata as well on top of minting and registering IP. Um, the issue is that Story Protocol gateway requires its own NFT collection, so that if you see up here, I also create my own NFT collection on top of the simple one that I created. But Story Protocol Gateway exposes a function called create collection. So whenever you want to use a Story Protocol Gateway to mint NFTs and do something about it, you need to first create a collection. If you want to use Story Protocol just for registering IPs, but not minting NFTs for registering IPs, so if you're just using it for registering IPs, you don't need to create a collection through Story Protocol, but you know, minting NFTs require a Story Protocol gateway collection. Yeah, so you can see, I call Story Protocol gateway dot mint and register IP, pass in the contract address, the message sender, and this contract address is the NFT that was created through SPG, and then the actual metadata. And this metadata can be anything that you want to put in. So this also means NFT through the Story Protocol Gateways collection, and then um, registers it on Story Protocol with metadata. And I said, simple NFTs is a light wrapper around ERC 721. Yeah, so once you write these files, which is already in the boilerplate, but once you write them yourselves, you can run forge build, and then you can also run these test cases, which proves that it works as intended. So we before we mint the NFT, we get the expected token ID, and then we before we register the IP, the NFT as an IP on Story Protocol, we get the expected um, IP ID, which is the identifier for the IP account. And then we actually, call mint IP through the contract that we just wrote. And then we just do some assertions to check that the IP ID returned by minting and registering the IP is same as, what we expected. Token ID was as well. And then the owner of the simple NFT for that token ID is Alice. And then same for the SPG mint IP, which is identical checks, it's just different function calling. Yep. So if you want, you can also forge test these contracts as well. Any questions so far on this registering an NFT as an IP asset?
I did get one question. The question, it's a clarifying question about something you said earlier. So, the register function on Story Protocol, can anyone call that for anyone's NFT, or can I only call that for an NFT that I own?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Oh, sure, yeah. So the question is, if I'm calling the register function, can I only register NFTs that I own, or can I register anyone else's NFT as well?
Yes, you can register anyone's NFT. And that doesn't mean that you're getting the access to that IP account that you're registering. You're just doing a service for other people. So you're just basically paying gas for them, gas, instead of them registering themselves.
Makes sense.
Because, IP account, the owner is the NFT owner. So even if you register an IP account for another NFT owner, the owner of that IP account is the It's not you, it's the other NFT owner. Yeah.
Makes sense. And then one other question is, you might have done this already, but do you mind showing an example of how you would just simply register IP and not like mint and register, but just a register example?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to just register, this is the line that you want. IP asset registry dot register. Passing the blockchain ID. So there'll be on Sefolia there'll be 111551111. But you can also use block.chain ID. And then the address of the NFT that you want to register, and then the actual token ID. Because if you have um, token ID one of the simple NFT, you want to register that, you just pass in these parameters to the IPS registry, and that should allow you to register your NFT as an IP.
Awesome. Thanks, JDub.
Cool. So the next step is adding a license terms to an IPA. So in essence, what this means is whenever you want to mint a license token, so whenever you want to allow derivation of your IP, so you want other people to remix your IP and reuse your IP for their own content. Whenever you want to allow that, you have to first attach a thing called license terms. And these license terms basically mean different parameters. So there are different parameters that specify how license acquirer, so the licensor, can how the person who owns the license token of this license terms can use your IPA. So if, for example, the most popular one that we have is called a programmable IP license, non-commercial social remixing, or NCSR. Uh, NCSR basically it states that you can derivate my IP as long as you attribute it to me and you don't have any commercial revenue generated from your, children IPs. So you have to attach the license terms to make your IPA more useful in that sense for remixing. So for now, for V 1.0, you can only add new license terms to an IPA if it's not a derivative. So if your IPA is already a child of another IPA, then you can't add a new license terms. And that's just a restriction that we have for now, but it will probably get lifted in a future version. So yeah, so here's another contract. It's called IPA license term dot sol. This is also in the boilerplate, and you can test it as well. So there's a function called attach license terms. So what it does is it first does the same thing where it mints the NFT and then registers the NFT as an IP account on Story Protocol. And a little bit difference from the previous one is that the previous one mints to the message sender. So if Alice is calling this function, or if Alice is calling mint IP, she'll be getting the NFT right away. But in our case, we're first minting it to this contract. And that's because if you want to attach license term to an IP account, you have to be the owner, or you have to be granted the right to do it through the access controller. And for the sake of simplicity, I just decided to follow the first condition, where the person who attaches the license terms is also the owner of the IP account, which means that the person is the owner of the NFT. So in this case, I'm just minting into this contract because this contract also attaches the license terms. Um, yeah, so it mints the NFT to this contract, it registers it, and then it calls the licensing module that attach license terms. So the first parameter is the IP ID that you want to attach license terms to. And then the second parameter is called the license template. And I'm going to dive more into it. But basically, in most cases, you should just use PIL template. That's the programmable IP template that we have. And it's very extensive. It covers most of the cases that you probably need, if not all. So you should use PLO template most of the times, unless you want to create your own license template, which would be amazing. And then the license terms ID. So this is the ID that's returned when you create a new set of license terms. So NCSR, non-commercial social remixing, is, as I said, one parameter, one selection of parameters, as you can see here. Um, there's like attribution must be true, a derivative is allowed, and then it's transferable, and you should not have any commercial use. So this is one, set of values that this term is picked. So whenever you do that, you get a unique ID back. So in the case of NCSR, the ID is two in the protocol, so that you don't have to register it anymore. So like, whoever registers it with this value, um, got ID two, and then whenever you try to register again, since it's already registered, you always get two back. So right here, I'm just using one as a for example. I'm not sure what one exactly is. It's just some license terms. I think it's a commercial uses. So I'm attaching a commercial license terms to my IP ID. What that means is I'm basically letting people um, create commercial remixes so that they can profit from their remix, and then I get a revenue share of that. And then at the end, um, I transfer the NFT to the message sender. So if Alice called this, I transfer it to Alice so that she is the owner of the NFT, which implies that she is the owner of the IP account. Yeah, so more about the license template. License template is basically, um, as I said, license terms ID represents which values were selected. So if attribution was false here, they'll return different ID, even if all these other values are true, or same. So if license terms ID represent the values, license template sort of represents the keys. So what that means is like different license templates can have different keys, such as it might not have the attribution field, so that it never requires anyone to care about attribution if you use that license template. It could be like a CC0 license template, which is like a smaller version of PIL. And then license templates have their own checks when you register derivatives or when you attach license terms. So if you try to attach license terms, uh, when you try to even within the PIL template, if you try to attach a commercial license term and a non-commercial license terms to the same IP, they might collide and the attaching might fail. So you have to keep in mind of which license terms you're attaching. So if you run the test here, this also should work as expected. So we're expecting license template to be a PIL template, and then we are expecting the license terms ID to be one, and then we call attach license terms, and then it's we check has IP attached license terms, and then we pass in the IP ID, expected license template, and then the expected license terms, and that should return true. And then we check how many attached license terms it has. That should return one because we just attached one, and then the PIL license term or PIL license term ID one is attached, so you can test it here. Any questions on this so far? Cool. It's a lot to unpack, so
Yeah, I think I didn't get any questions on that one, so should be all good.
cool. In most cases, to explore, I recommend attaching the NCSR, non-commercial social remixing, PIL. This is the most like free work or free license terms that you can attach, I guess. It's license ID two, license terms ID two on Story Protocol for V1.
Actually, I did get
So the
so one
yeah.
question. So just to repeat what you said earlier, what are the conditions for being able to attach terms to an IP? It's being like the owner and what else?
So first is being the owner. Second, you have to be a delegate, and that means that you are granted access by the owner. And that is done through the access controller. Um, we don't have an example here, but there's a I can probably provide an example later. Just ping me in the chat. But yeah, you have to basically as the IP owner, you have to grant access for another person to do normally do. And that's the other way of, if I have the access granted, then I can do it on the behalf of the IP owner.
That makes sense. So in this example, we mint the NFT to this contract so that this contract can attach license terms. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just for it's easier to do it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, J-Dub.
Cool. And the third step is minting the actual license token for the IPA. So now that we know that the IPA contains NCSR or some terms, we can actually mint license tokens from the term. And you can once you have, license tokens are ERC 721s, so you can sell it on the marketplaces, you can give it to other people if it's transferable. And basically, that it gives you uh it grants you to create a derivative IPA. So in this contract called IPA license token.sol, there is a function called mint license token, and this has two parameters, unlike the previous two ones where it didn't. So these two parameters mean, how many license tokens to mint, and then who should be the recipient or the receiver of those license tokens. So first, as previously did, we first mint the NFT to this contract, and then we mint the NFT to this contract, and then we register it as an IP through the IP asset registry, and then we attach the license terms as the previous step as well. So again, the reason why mint to this contract, mint the NFT to this contract is so that we can attach license terms more easily. Um, so you are attaching, in this case, we are attaching license terms ID 2, which is the NCSR license. So we are attaching an NCSR, non-commercial social remixing PIO license to this IP that we just created. And then there's, the next step is minting the actual license tokens. And then again, so because this contract is the owner of the IP, it can mint license tokens right away. If you're not the owner of the IP account, then you have to get a permission from the IP account owner to mint license tokens. Um, but or so there's a second condition, or there's a third condition where um, if the owner attached license terms to its IP, that signals that you can mint license tokens publicly. So basically, it's allowing people to mint license tokens from your IP. So if Alice attaches some license terms to her IP and indicate that anyone can mint it, Bob can come in and mint a license token from that IP, like, without asking for permission. So here we call licensing module dot mint license tokens, pass in the license or IP ID, the template address, the PIL template address, and the terms ID 2, which is the NCSR, and then the amount to mint, and then the recipient. And for PIL specifically, you should always pass in an empty string for royalty context. This might not be true for other license templates, but for programmable IP license template, these should always be empty. So this means, in this case, this means X amount of license tokens, and then returns the starting token ID. So if this is the first time minting, then this should return one. The start license token ID should be one, and then yeah, so it should be one. And then again, we transfer the NFT to the message sender. So if Alice called this function, she becomes the owner of the NFT and also the owner of the IP account. Um, yeah, so here's the test for it again. So we are first, we're calling mint license token, and then we're passing in how much we want to mint, and then who should receive it. So in this case, Alice is calling mint license token, but Bob is the recipient. So at the end of this function call, Bob should have two license tokens of that represents NCSR, non-commercial social remixing terms of Alice's IP. So what this means is Bob can create a non-commercial Bob can non-commercially remix Alice's IPs. Bob can create, derivative IPs as long as he attributes it to Alice, and then he doesn't generate any profit out of it. So this returns the IP ID, the token ID, the star license token, and then we can actually check that Bob is the owner of the ID one in this case, and then ID one plus one, so ID two. So this should also return true for both. Yeah, so that's the minting license token part. Any questions on the license tokens?
Not specifically on license tokens, but can you explain how IP account is handled when there's more than one owner of an asset? Like for example, let's say it's a patent and they want to register an IP for it.
Yes.
So there's obviously more than one
Yep.
author or owner. So how does it work?
Good question. So in our protocol, as all NFTs are managed, or in the ERC 721 contract, the owner is always one address. So the way to do multi-owner, so multiple people ownership, is to have a something like multi-sig, where you have this one account that's controlled by multiple people. So that account is, you need to have like certain number of signatures from those people to transact. So you have this um, multi-sig, and then the multi-sig owns the NFT. So that allows you to sort of have a layer where that layer represents, multiple people's ownership. So you have to use a multi-sig for multi-person ownership. Um, we are we decided to externalize it to a multi-sig. Yeah. So um, to summarize, you create a multi-sig. So you add how many people, however many people you want to the multi-sig. So it could be like 5 people, 10 people, um, and then you transfer or you mint NFT uh, using the multisig. So the multisig is the owner, and then you do all this so that even though the owner in the context of IP asset is the multisig, the actual owners of the multisig can control it. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yep. And then the most popular multisig out there is the Safe wallet. So this is a good multisig to try it out. Um, And then there's also, the protocols can also handle it themselves if they want. So yeah. Any more questions related to license tokens or in general to IPAs? So by the way, before you mint license tokens, you should have license terms attached. Yeah, there's a niche case where you can mint license tokens without attaching license terms, but you can only do that as the owner. That's called private license token minting, where because the license terms aren't actually attached to your IP, you as the owner can only mint license tokens of any license terms. And what that means is you basically have this number of license tokens that grant license rights to your IP but only you can mint it, right? So you can actually, you can always you can attach a non-commercial social remixing license to your IP. So anyone can non-commercially remix your IP, but you can also privately mint um, commercial license tokens and sell it to people. So let's say, you have this really popular IP. Anyone can create a non-commercial version of it, but only a selected number of people can create a commercial version, a commercial remix of your IP. So, you're sort of like gating the commercial rights. And you can do that by not attaching license terms and minting the license tokens as the owner. And so that, you can pass in any license template address and then any license terms ID here. Whereas if you are not the owner and you're calling to like acquire license tokens, you have to pass in the license template and the license terms ID that are already attached to the IP. So it's a permissionless license token minting versus private license token minting. Yeah. So the final step is remixing, IPA remixing. So once you have the license tokens, you can start creating a derivative IP. In some cases, you can also create a derivative IP without license tokens, but in most cases, you'll require license tokens to remix an IP. And when you remix an IP, so when you create a IP that is a child of another IP, aka the derivative, aka it's known as a derivative IP. When you create a derivative IP, you have to burn the license tokens in order to link to the parent. So we can walk through the code here. So it's the same thing where we mint we mint the NFT to this contract, we register it as an IP, and then you attach the non-commercial social remixing terms, and then you mint the license tokens. So actually, this code is the identical as the previous example, because what we really only need is the minting of the license tokens. So the difference is in the test. So what we do is, as done before in the previous section, Alice means two non-commercial social remixing license tokens to Bob. And you can see the code here. So Bob now has two NCSR license tokens, and we do the check here. And then Bob can use the minted license token from Alice to register a derivative IP. And this derivative IP from Bob would be a child of Alice's IP. So we mint the we mint an NFT for Bob. Bob registers it as an IP. But this time, instead of attaching license terms, Bob calls register derivative with license tokens on the licensing module. So licensing module dot register derivative with license tokens. And as the name implies, you are registering an existing IP as a derivative IP, as a child IP, using license tokens. So you're passing in, the IP ID that is going to be a child IP. So we just call it the child IP ID. And then the license tokens that you want to use. And this will be burned when you use them. And then again, for PIL, because we're using PIL in this context, programmable IP license, we pass in an empty string for royalty context again. So when you call this, what happens is, first it checks that Bob owns the license token IDs that it specified in this array. Second, it does some checks. You can check more of what happens under the hood in the core contract. Third, after the checks, it links Bob's IP to Alice's IP. So Bob's IP become a child. Um, and fourth, it burns the license tokens that Bob used to link. And when I say linking, it's a simple um, adding. It's a simple step where the Alice's IP has this set called child IP set. So we add Bob's IP to Alice's child IP set, and then similarly, we add Alice's IP to Bob's parent IP set, so that linking is done through through the sets. So we check here now that license through the license registry that parent IP ID, so that Alice's IP has derivatives, and that Alice's IP is a parent of Bob's IP, and then that the Bob's IP is a derivative IP, and we also do a bunch of test check here. So these checks, guarantee that Bob's IP is a child of Alice's IP. So just to reiterate, what we're doing here is Bob acquired license tokens from Alice. Bob uses one of them to link his registered IP to Alice, and that basically creates a derivative IP. Bob's IP become a child of Alice. Yeah. Any questions for this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
So, for derivatives, are there any restrictions on like what, well, let's say, another, let me ask it this way. Can the derivatives be from different collections or contracts?
Yep. As long as yes. So, if you want to register derivative, you can do any NFTs from any collections. You just have to make sure that you have the license tokens. I guess the only restriction that we have when you link to a parent is that you should not have any license terms attached. Um, yes, that's the only restriction. And the reason why you do that is usually when you have a license terms attached to you, that indicates that you are willing to have children, and that sort of like interferes with our checking of the code. So in the future, we want to improve that. But for now, let's say if Bob attaches a license, license terms like NCSR to his IP, and then tries to link it by calling this function, it will fail because Bob already has license terms attached. So yeah, as long as Bob doesn't do that, he can do this linking on any NFTs from any NFTs. Yeah.
Can you please explain the license token part, the minting and burning? How much uh, is minted usually by the IP account, and is there a limit?
Yeah, so the IP account, so the owner of the IP account can create as many license tokens as she wants. There's no restriction for that. Um and there's also no restriction for children to, they can have as many license tokens as they want. It's just that when you actually link to a parent, you have to burn those license tokens. And the burning happens, internally in our contracts, but just know that once you link, those license tokens are burned. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so the IP account owner can also put up a restriction of I'll only give you 10 tokens, and if you're done with that, that's the end of the license. Is that a use case?
Yep, exactly. That's also use case. So if I have these really rare license terms, like, for the first 10 people who want to license my IP, I sell it for really cheap. So it's like $1 for my license. And, because you're early supporter, you get it for, no royalty shared. So if 10 people, if you get all that 10 license tokens, that's the end of the license. Like no one else can acquire those license tokens. And I can create a next license that says, the early supporters are done, so now you have to pay me $100 to buy one license token. Yeah, so and then I can do like thousands of them and then go to the next where I charge like 1 million for my license. So yeah, you can have a limited number of license token minted as the IP owner.
Got it.
Cool. And I see some questions in the chat. How does the system handle scenarios where multiple derivative IPs are created from the same original IP using different sets of license tokens. Um, so as long as the derivative IPs, so if I understand correctly, you're asking what if a parent IP has multiple derivative IPs from different license tokens, which might have different license terms. That should be fine as long as um, the parent's license terms don't conflict. So if Alice as a parent, if Alice's IP has some license terms attached, as long as they don't conflict, they should be able to be attached to Alice's IP. So if I have a commercial license and another commercial license terms, if I attach both to my IP, they shouldn't conflict in most cases. But if I have a non-commercial license terms and a commercial license terms, if I try to attach it to my license or if I try to attach it to my IP, that should fail because the check are incompatible between a non-commercial and a commercial one, I believe. Um, there's some check going on with the PIL, but as long as the parent's IP passes the check in the PIL, it should be able to attach any license terms. And as long as the parent has any license terms, derivative IPs can mint license tokens from any of those license terms. So derivative IP1 might have license term, A, so that's like different license tokens. And the derivative IP2 might have used license tokens from license terms 2 that's attached to the same parent. Yeah, so there shouldn't be so we do a check at the attaching of license terms to the parent. So there shouldn't be any conflicts for derivatives when they register IPs or when they link IPs. So and the second question is, can the IP registry handle dynamic changes in license terms, or are they fixed once the derivative IP is registered? Yeah, so if Alice sets some license terms and later decides to change it, she can't do that because there'll be, I guess, scamming in some sense. So if I create a license terms that says pay me $10 upfront and share me 10% of the revenue, once I create that, and someone uses that to create a derivative IP, I can't change it anymore. If no one registers the derivative IP through that license terms, I can remove it from my IP. But as soon as someone uses it as a child, I can no longer remove it and it's immutable. And that's like a feature in our protocol to ensure that you don't get rug pulled for licensing a parent IP. What happens if the license tokens are lost or transferred mistakenly before they are used to register a derivative IP? That's a good question. Right now, we don't have a recovery mechanism. It's, we see it as accidentally sending your NFT to a burn address. So like we can't do much about it. But certainly we could explore some recovery mechanisms in the future. But for now, if you send it to a wrong address or if you burn it accidentally, we can't recover the license tokens for you. Yep. Hopefully that answered the questions.
So I got one more question about something you were talking about earlier. So earlier you were saying that you could create, for example, 10 license tokens, and you could issue those out, and that would be almost like a private license. Is it true that in order to make a private license, you basically just wouldn't attach license terms to your IP asset, but you can still mint license tokens with certain terms? Like, I guess what I'm saying is, can you mint license tokens with certain terms, even if those terms are not attached to your IP asset?
Exactly. I believe the restriction is that only the IP owner can do it. So if you're the IP owner, you can mint license tokens of any terms without attaching it to your IP. Yeah, I think that's the only restriction. But yeah, you're correct in your question. Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Um, any more questions on any of these steps? You can also reference the Story Protocol Gateway contract, which is basically what a lot of these do. Um, for convenience. So you can also check that out. It's Story Protocol Periphery Contract V1 SPG. Yep, and so this has a bunch of usages, including signature-based calls, which I didn't cover in the Get Started, but yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for walking through all this smart contract stuff. Does anyone have any remaining questions before we close out this workshop? All right. Thank you so much to everyone who came to this workshop, and thank you so much to JDub for hosting it. This was all recorded and will be available. I will post the recording on Discord so all of you can go and view it. And of course, if you have any questions about building on Story Protocol or about the Build-a-thon, just let us know in the dev chat channel, and we'll be sure to answer any questions you have. So thanks everyone so much for coming. And yeah, we have office hours after this and over the next couple weeks as well to help you out with the Build-a-thon. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.